Okay, so hello everybody. This is day 2 of our commercial training with the legend Mr. Terry Butt. Today I'm gonna simulate that I'm a brand new commercial landlord and I just inherited this commercial space that we were talking about yesterday, 290 the West Mall, Unit 15B, and because I have no previous experience being a commercial landlord, I've essentially have invited Terry Bott to lease the property, and he will ask me questions that I will try to find out based on the listing that I have. But other than that, I'm gonna pretend I have no knowledge of the commercial business. So, ready? Hi, Terry. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you, Julio. Nice to see you again.
Thank you.
That was a good introduction. Starting with we're looking at potential occupancy for a potential tenant that you're representing for retail commercial space. So that's all we're going to discuss basically in this session.
Yep.
So the first thing you really have to do is get all your documentation in place, get your agreements that you would ordinarily use if you were acting for a buyer buying a single family home, and then get the listing agreement together. Plus, we will go through the full commercial listing step by step and point by point so that you can properly represent the landlord as his or her agent in listing the space for rent and ultimately leasing it.
Okay, so let's say that we're starting. So I would say, hey, Terry, thanks for coming. I just inherited this commercial space.
Yeah.
I have absolutely no idea. I have no previous experience as to being a landlord.
Right.
But now I gotta rent this space. Based on the information I have here, is about 3,800 square feet. In a commercial plaza here in the West Mall. Can you help me rent it out?
Okay. Thank you for asking me to act as your representative in leasing your property. I assume, is the property vacant now?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So let's start off and go through the questions one would ask before filling out all the documentation.
Perfect.
So the first document we come to, of course, is the actual listing agreement.
Okay.
This commercial listing agreement, very similar to a residential listing agreement. So you have to go through this documentation and get it filled out by you, the landlord. Okay. So it shows exactly square footage, TMI, which is taxes, maintenance, insurance, annual rent, etc., what is included, and we can go into that in detail and go through the actual listing agreement. If I was going to be representing you, I also would want to have a complete tour of the vacant retail commercial space, and if there's a basement, what's there, etc. So you have to do your homework, and after you've finished the full listing agreement and all the documentation that's being ready to send to Trev to put on the commercial network, I would want you as the landlord to supply me with all the backup documentation that verifies all the income and expenses of this retail commercial space.
Okay, perfect. So so exactly what documents you would need from me today, Terry?
To start with,
Yep.
if you have a set of plans that shows the exact square footage of the ground floor retail commercial space.
Okay.
Number one. If you don't have plans, you can go into Geo Warehouse or to MPAC and probably find a lot of information, or you can go to the local municipality. They'll have stuff on file there that you can go to the planning department and find out things. So one, square footage, frontage, depth. 2, on the lower level, if there is a basement, what's there, assuming for storage, etc., or other uses. I would get a copy of the tax bill.
Okay.
I would get a copy of the insurance.
Okay.
I would get a copy of any other documentation, maintenance, etc., that has to do with what the new tenant will have to pay on a per square foot per annum.
Okay.
So if you've got your tax bill, that's one thing. If you've got the cost of maintaining the existing retail commercial space, that's part of it, and you should have a copy of the insurance coverage that you as a landlord want your new tenant to have the coverage to protect you as a landlord.
Okay. And if I'm just a regular person, I don't have a corporation.
Yeah.
In terms of
It all depends. Most retail commercial spaces, I would say, are probably, as a prospective tenant, probably have a corporate entity that would be the tenant. It could be on a personal basis, but not too many people rent space today on a personal basis because of liability, etc., etc.
and if I was a landlord but still I didn't have a corporation, the same thing?
Yes, if it's a qualified corporation, the landlord could demand from you copies of your financial statements to make sure you're credible, or personal banking information, so that they could qualify you as a prospective tenant.
Okay, perfect. So if I'm a landlord, you would ask for my corporation documents?
I certainly would, yes, sir.
Okay. And my identification?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So,
And the type of use, like we can get into, for example, that retail commercial space that you were talking about, there is specific zoning for specific uses within specific areas of the City of Toronto or any other municipality. So the other thing that the listing agent should have is a copy of the zoning bylaw that you can go online for the City of Toronto and get, that allows certain retail or mixed commercial uses for that property.
okay. If I'm in a condominium, well, this is a plaza, but if I was in a, well, that's different. I guess that's
Condominium is totally different.
totally different.
Yeah,
Okay.
totally. Yeah. This is strictly based on commercial rents in the area, etc., etc.
Gotcha.
And you, as the landlord, would probably know what the rental rates generally are within the area or within that commercial plaza.
Okay, great. So, assuming that, let's say you would start taking the listing agreement, and we'll put this on the screen, I guess, at some point.
I think it's a good idea to show each page here on the standard commercial listing agreement, and you can look at it while you're going through it, Julio.
No problem.
It's very similar to a residential listing agreement, but there is some other documentation that you'll have to provide as the listing agent.
Okay, so here we have a MLS listing agreement for commercial landlord representation agreement.
Yeah.
Authority to offer for lease. So it will be between, in our case, LePage West Realty Group and the name of the landlord. And then in consideration of the listing broker's listing for lease.
Yep.
Of the premises known as
Address.
Right? The address, which premises for the whole or part of the real property municipality known as
City of Toronto.
City of Toronto.
Correct.
The landlord hereby gives the listing brokers exclusive and irrevocable right to act as the landlord's agent, commencing on, and then here we have commencing a time and a date until,
I would say minimum 60, possibly 90 days.
okay, and then we have the portion in which it says that if the listing period exceeds 6 months, the listing brokerage must obtain the landlord's initial. So
Yes, yeah.
that's same for residential.
Correct.
To offer the premises for lease at the rent of,
And that would be the either a monthly rent or a per square foot per annum rent.
Okay.
And just use this as an example, retail commercial space, say on Dundas Street, is leasing for $20 per square foot net plus TMI, which is taxes, maintenance, and insurance.
Okay, perfect. And upon the terms particularly set out herein, or as such other than rent and other terms acceptable to the landlord, it is understood that the rent and the terms set out herein are at the landlord's personal request, and after full discussion with the listing brokerage, yada yada yada.
Right.
Then after that, the landlord hereby represents and warrants the landlord is not party to any other listing agreement.
Yes.
For the premises.
Yeah.
Or agreements to pay a commission to other brokerage.
Yeah.
You know that?
That's
Definitions
yes.
and interpretations.
Yeah. We don't have to go through that in detail.
Right.
However, as I mentioned to you before, if there is an existing tenant that has given notice to vacate, you may have to negotiate with that tenant with the landlord's approval when you can show the property to a prospective new tenant.
Okay.
It's similar if there's a single-family residential home that you listed for sale and the people still live in there, you've got to give them an adequate notice and timing to show the house. Same thing if there was a existing tenant. Now, if it's vacant, then probably you can obtain from the landlord a key, and you can set the hours in your listing agreement of when you're allowed to show the retail commercial space.
Got it. All right. Speaking of commission, which is the next item.
Yes.
In consideration of the listing brokerage listing the premises, the landlord agrees to pay the listing brokerage a commission of.
Typical retail commercial listings for lease are 4% of the first year net rent and 2% of the remaining term up to a max of maybe 5 years per annum.
Okay, so on closing of this, I will make 4%, and then every year I will make 2 every year.
It's paid up front on closing. Yes, yes.
Okay.
You would bill the landlord for 4% plus 2 plus 2 plus 2. If the listing, if the property is leased by a third party real estate agency, then you would split 50-50 with them.
Okay, so if you would double in, it would be 4% plus 2 plus 2 plus 2.
Yeah.
So if
maybe
it's
for a
5
max
years,
of 5 years.
5 years.
Yeah.
So
most leases today are 5-year leases, commercial, retail, very standard.
And they would pay the 4 plus the 2 plus the 2 plus the 2 plus the 2.
Yeah, you would get a
upfront.
substantial deposit. You'd get the first and last month's rent.
Okay.
Put it into your real estate brokerage trust account, and that should be enough to cover your commission.
Okay, great.
Okay?
All right, perfect. So coming back to this. And then here's where it would say how much we're paying the cooperating brokerage. So
Correct.
in this case would be half of that.
Yes.
All right. Holdover period, which I'm
180
assuming
days, yeah, standard. Yeah.
standard,
Yeah.
same as residential. Representation, which I'm sure is the landlord acknowledges the listing brokerage has provided the landlord with written information
Yeah.
explaining agency, multiple representation, exact same thing as residential. We assume.
Exactly the same forms, but just a little different.
All
Like
right.
working with a realtor, commercial.
Okay.
Get that filled out.
Multiple representation and customer service,
Yeah.
referral or inquiries,
Yeah.
marketing,
Yeah.
warranty. What is warranty? The landlord represents and warrants that the landlord has exclusive authority and power to execute this authority
Yes.
to offer the premises for lease.
He's the owner of the property.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Indemnification and insurance,
Yeah.
so similar as
Same thing, yes. Yep.
Family Law Act, the same thing.
Yeah.
Verification of information.
Correct.
The landlord authorizes the listing broker to obtain any information from any regulatory authorities. This regard as may be reasonable required. The landlord hereby appoints a listing brokerage authorized representatives as the landlord's attorney to execute such documentation.
Yeah.
All right.
All right. No, you're doing fine. We'll discuss some of that when we get to the actual listing agreement.
Very good. So, use and distribution of information. The landlord's consent to the collection, use, and disclosure of personal information by the brokerage for the purposes of listing and marketing the premises, including but not limited to listing advertising. Standard.
Yeah.
And then the signature page, which is the same.
Yeah. If it's a corporate entity that owns the building,
right,
where the retail space is going to be listed for sale, listed for rent, then the landlord must sign as the corporation and per his name underneath.
Okay.
If he owns it personally, then it's just a personal signature.
Gotcha. So that's where it says the name of the landlord and signature of landlord and authorized signing officer. All right. Declaration of insurance, which is by you, and the acknowledgement page. All right. So you will go through this document first.
Yes.
And then after gathering documents as well, or in the process of, and then moving on to the
actual listing agreement.
The data sheet.
The data sheet, yeah. I would have the data sheet and the listing agreement. When I did retail commercial listings, I tried to get ahead of time as much documentation that I could get from the landlord to properly fill out the data sheet, similar to single-family residential, right? And then get the listing agreement signed after the fact, because you got to verify. It's the responsibility of the listing agent to verify all the documentation you obtain from the landlord. Okay?
Now, when it comes to commission, when you explain the standard commissions, which is 4% plus 2 plus 2, do you find resistance or on
that's
that?
standard in the commercial marketplace in the greater GTA today.
Really? So nobody says, "Can you give me a lower?"
Yes, landlords may want to negotiate, and that's up to you as the listing agent and the landlord. You can have a flat fee, for example, of X dollars. All right. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not illegal. But when you pull up most of the listings today, they're on a percentage basis per annum.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Like the one listing that you had on the East Mall, I don't know what the commission is there, but
The commission was only 3%, so it doesn't say anything.
just a flat 3%.
Just a flat 3%.
That's low.
Okay. Now I have another one, another listing here.
Yeah.
And it says commission is 4% / 1.75%.
Okay.
So what does that mean?
4% of the first year and 1.75% of the remaining years.
Of the remaining, so they don't have to do it per year.
But you got to figure it out.
You gotta figure it out.
Yeah.
I have another
No, you found some other
listing on
listings.
68 Jutland. It only says 3%.
Yeah. Just up around the corner. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, how big is those properties? Are they retail, commercial, or are they industrial?
This 66 Jutland is 1.8 million.
No, that's for sale.
Yeah.
Not for lease.
sale.
Okay.
Sorry about
Yeah,
that.
we haven't discussed for sale.
For sale, yeah, I put out another. Yeah, so for rent, that's what I have.
That's
so
all
far.
you have. Okay.
So 1.75 for the remaining of the
Term of the lease. Yes.
and then 4%.
Usually, or a set amount. The landlord will say, "I will only pay you for the first 3 years."
Okay.
So but that's got to be set out in the listing agreement. You have to get his signature on there that how much he'll pay you, and it can vary. If you get a very large retail commercial space, like 10,000 square feet or something, then the commission may be a lot lower percentage wise, but it's a lot bigger property to lease. Therefore, you're in a situation where it may only be, 2%, 1%, 1%, 1%. It's negotiable between the landlord, okay, and you as the agent.
Now, you were, before we started recording, you were mentioning that you can do the same thing as a commercial agent where you put together a marketing presentation, right?
Well, for example, I
or
know
a listing presentation.
most of the residential agents here, when they go out and list, let's say, a single-family home for sale, they go in, they do an inspection. They usually have photographs taken. They may send in other staging people, etc. If you go out and look at the retail commercial space, if it's a mess and there's junk all over the place and it hasn't been cleaned up properly when the tenant vacated and it doesn't show well, then I suggest to you that you get the landlord to totally clean the premises for a proper presentation when you're going to take in a potential client to look at the space. Same thing with the lower level. If there is a basement, get everything cleaned out so it shows properly, okay? So take good photographs. Once you fill out the listing agreement that's signed and all the documentation is there, I would also suggest that you take good photographs of the outside of the building, the parking area, the rear part of the building, if there's parking in the back, etc. So you've got a good presentation you can put together in 3 or 4 pages that if there is a prospective tenant from a third-party real estate brokerage firm, you can email him the whole package. And when we get into the listing agreement, we'll go over all the documentation that you have to have on your listing to submit it to TREB Commercial.
When it comes to finding the right agent, commercial agent, in your experience, is it more like the agent's knowledge when it comes to commercial? Or because, for example, if we're competing for a listing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Normally residential agents will come in and show a presentation of like their marketing services and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Do you find that in commercial is more like what brokerage you're in, or what is your experience, or your connections, other than just how nice your PowerPoint was?
Yes, very true. Some of the larger successful commercial real estate brokerage firms like CBRE, Cushman Wakefield, Avison, a few of the others, they even have their own in-house marketing teams that put these retail, commercial, or industrial, or sale of other properties together for proper presentations, and some of them are absolutely magnificent. But this is for a much larger. For a smaller retail commercial, if the agent, let's say in this office here, has a client that has vacant retail commercial space here in Etobicoke and needs some backup help, etc., I'd be most pleased. I'm not looking for any commission, but if I can be of service to that particular agent, I would be prepared to go out with them, look at the property, talk to the landlord. I have a 4-page brief history on my 55 years in the commercial real estate business, which goes a long way today, rather than just being a typical residential agent and not understanding anything about retail commercial space.
Okay, perfect. All right. And so from here, you will move obviously to the MLS data sheet.
Yes, sir.
Which we went over yesterday and fill it in.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We went over that for a prospective tenant.
Correct.
Now we're going to go over it for the actual owner-landlord.
Okay. So what else from yesterday? Of course, we spoke yesterday about all of the fields.
Yes.
But what would you in particular
start
focus?
from the beginning again. And we'll
the address, municipality.
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
Very similar. Yeah.
Postal code, lot front, lot depth.
Okay. Now, It could be a 50 by 100-foot retail commercial building, but it has 2 or 3 retail commercial spaces. So yes, you can fill that in, but you're only going to deal specifically with the space that's going to come available for rent.
Okay, sounds good.
But you still have to fill it in.
You still have to fill it in?
Yeah, it's mandatory.
All right.
If you don't fill in all the mandatory documentation,
you won't load it. Yeah.
it won't be loaded into TRIP.
All right. Direction, main cross streets,
Yep.
all of that.
Very similar to,
Lease, sublease, lease price.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so it's going to be a lease, we're assuming, because it's vacant, so it'll be a new lease, right?
New lease.
Yeah. Now, do you want to discuss if the landlord has an existing lease agreement?
Yes, let's just go
Standard
there now.
agreement?
Yep.
Or if you do one of two things. TREB has excellent documentation when it comes to commercial retail space, okay? The standard agreement to lease that's on TREB is excellent, and you can modify it to this particular property we're talking about, okay? However, the landlord also may have his own standard lease agreement, which is a final agreement, could be 30 or 40 pages long, 8.5 by 14, and he may even have a standard agreement to lease.
Okay.
That you could use because you're acting on his behalf, not on behalf of the tenant.
Okay. So let's say I'm a brand new commercial landlord. I have nothing. Would you recommend the short form or the long form?
I would get the short form agreement to lease, all right?
Okay.
So he understands the situation. But if he has a solicitor or a lawyer, most of them have standard lease agreements, and there are lease agreements certainly available for retail commercial space.
Okay. So you would use at least the short form, which is
Yes, to
easier
start with. Yes.
swallow for a brand new.
Yes. Well, no, you're acting on behalf of a landlord, so I'm assuming that landlord has some documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
But if I was a new landlord and I didn't know better, you can.
I won't comment on that.
All right. Let's just move on.
I don't want to get in trouble with landlords.
Very good. So, lease price code. We spoke about this yesterday.
Yeah.
You would use a net.
Lease amount.
Lease amount.
Okay, give you an example. Okay, if the market in commercial retail space along Dundas Street here is $20 a square foot net, and the retail space is 20 by 50, which is 1,000 square feet, then you multiply 20 times 1,000, okay? Which gives you the net annual rent.
Yep.
Divided by 12 will give you the monthly net rent. And then you have to get copies of the documentation from the landlord. Let's assume he's an existing landlord, not a new landlord, where you've got the realty tax bill, okay, that relates to the property that's being leased, and maintenance charges, okay, and the insurance coverage that the landlord requires for a new tenant, so that the landlord is protected if anything happens to the new space.
Okay, perfect.
So that's called a TMI, okay? And here it could be $20 a square foot net. Some areas it could be $50 a square foot net, plus maintenance charges, which is a number that the landlord feels he has to charge you for upkeep of the premises, right? And you must have proper insurance coverage, your own insurance policy that also protects the landlord.
Okay. So the tenant would also pay the landlord's insurance.
Relating only to the retail commercial space that he's renting.
Okay.
Okay? And then there's other charges as well, because you've got heat, electricity, right? Water, all paid for by the tenant, usually, and the tenant, once a deal is negotiated, a agreement to lease is negotiated, the tenant will then have to go to the local municipality and talk to the different departments that he is now the new tenant taking occupancy on November the 1st, for example, and that the water and charges and any of the other utility charges would be charged directly to the tenant, and then he would pay those directly to the municipality.
Okay, great.
Unless it's a gross lease, which is a little different. There's not many gross leases today because monthly charges change and prices go up for electricity and gas and whatever. If it was a gross lease, then the tenant would pay the gross lease per square foot, okay, monthly, and that could be $30 a square foot, but would include taxes, maintenance, insurance, and utilities. Not very common. Did happen in older buildings years ago. Today, everything is pretty well done on what they call a net basis.
Perfect. All right. Moving on to the next item, minimum rental term.
Okay, now the landlord may have had this space rented before for 5 years, and the tenant vacated the premises and gave notice and moved out. So the most common today are 3 to 5 year leases for a typical retail commercial tenant with options to renew at new rental rates.
Okay, and that will be on their max term rent?
Yes.
Okay, all right. So you would put over here, let's say, it was a minimum 5 years.
Or you could say 3 years. It's
for 3 years, and the maximum rental might be 5 or 10. Okay.
Yeah.
And then down here we'll put the landlord name.
Yep.
Again, just as it was on the listing agreement. Contract commencement date.
That's entirely up to the landlord. If the property is vacant, you'd list it immediately after you've done all your documentation. If there's an existing tenant and they still have 60 or 90 days, then you can still list it today, but you'll have to follow the rules and regulations with the landlord and talk to the tenant when the property can be shown. Possibly if it's a retail commercial and they're open from 9 to 5 or 9 to 6, could be 9 to 9. Sometimes tenants don't want to necessarily, existing tenants don't want to necessarily have people coming in to look at the space during business hours, so you may have to show it at other times.
Okay. And as we mentioned, a lot of these rentals, well, not for maybe commercial retail, but they would be listed on their exclusivity rather than
yes, possibly. Well, you really have to check out, and I don't want to go into a great detail, but every municipality, any properties within that municipality have what they call site-specific zoning bylaws. And if the retail space only allows certain uses under the existing zoning bylaw, that's all you can put in the listing agreement. If it's a use that is not qualified by the local municipality, you can't rent that space for that use.
Gotcha. All right. Expiry date, possession date.
Well, expiry date, I'm probably saying 60, 90, 120 days. That's negotiable between you as the listing agent and the landlord, what they feel is acceptable. Sometimes they go 6 months too, as well.
Okay. Possession remarks, then taxes, right? So verify the tax bill. Like
you've got to get a copy of the tax bill. It should be part of your presentation.
Okay. Type taxes per year.
Yeah.
TMI, T and O. What is T and O?
What is T
and
O? Operating expenses. Okay.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Tax year. Well, we know that.
Yeah.
Assessment. That's not required.
You can find the assessment by going into Geo Warehouse and MPAC, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
It's also on the tax bill.
All right. Type, which in this case would be commercial retail. And then going back to the use, right?
Yes, sir.
Whether it's automotive, hospitality, retail store related.
Yeah.
So in
That would be,
case,
filled
that
in.
would be the
Yes,
deduction.
correct.
Would you go into, let's say, the subcategories here, ideally? Apparel, art gallery, or would you just leave it?
No, but I would make sure I got a copy of the site-specific zoning, so the use, you've got the use there, and you can present that use as part of your information package to a potential tenant.
Okay, great. So then we would skip down to whether it's a freestanding,
Yeah.
which we spoke about
Yeah.
yesterday, and total area,
Yep.
and total area code, whether it's square feet, which in this case that would be,
Yes.
and then retail area down at the end as well,
Yep.
and retail area code, which would be square feet. Get
Yep.
everything initial at the bottom,
Correct.
and then we move to page 3, which we have approximate age, which is not a mandatory field,
No.
basement.
That's important because if there is a basement, the rental rate for the retail space on the ground floor would include the right of use for a new tenant in the basement.
Okay, wonderful. Clear height.
Usually it could be 12-foot clear,
Okay.
standard, fill that in, yes.
All right. And then up to sprinkles.
Yes, if it's
Utility.
sprinklered, then your insurance costs are much lower. Older retail buildings in the general area here weren't sprinklered, but a lot of them landlords have put full sprinkler systems in over the last few years for fire protection.
Great. Utilities available, yes,
Yep.
no.
Yep,
Volts and amps. we
very
spoke about
important.
that.
Yeah, you have to go down in the basement and check the meters, and that information should be part of the listing agreement.
All right. Then we have water, whether it's municipal, none,
Yeah.
well, and all that. Air conditioning, we spoke about that.
Yep,
Yes, partial or no. Heat type.
yes.
Right.
It could be hot water, it could be central air, who knows, you know.
Okay. Truck level, ship doors.
That's more to do with industrial than commercial retail space, because usually there's just a door to the back of the retail store that would lead out to maybe a couple parking spaces at the rear of the building.
Okay, fantastic. Moving to the next column here. Same thing, grade level ship doors.
Yeah, more industrial.
Elevator, same thing.
Yeah,
Garage type,
probably no garages.
probably no garages. Parking spaces total.
Yes, now, in a retail commercial, you would have parking usually at the front of the retail store for customers, but probably may have a couple of parking spaces that are allocated to the tenant at the rear of the store.
All right. Outside storage.
Not really, that's more industrial.
Okay, same with rail.
Yes.
And crane, survey.
Right.
So-
Don't need a survey, but should have a set of plans.
Okay, sewers.
Yeah, there's sewers.
All right, and then down to our comments, which are remarks for clients.
Yeah. In here, I would suggest that the listing agent do a full written outline of the space, okay? Square footage, ceiling height, windows, rear entrance, basement. Put everything in you can about it, including maybe the site-specific zoning and the uses that you can have in that particular space.
Okay, this is very detailed. Same with extras.
Yeah.
And remarks for brokers.
Well, that can be, you know, when showings are, etc., how to get a key, will the tenant, if it's occupied, allow other agents to come in and show the property. If it's vacant, then you shouldn't have a problem. You could probably go in at any time.
All right. Now coming down to the financial information.
This is not a sale of a company. The only financial information, as I told you, is the net rent per square foot per annum, taxes, maintenance, insurance, and you also might be able to get a copy of all the utility bills.
Okay. Chattels.
Now, if there's anything in there that is attached as fixtures, let's assume that it was a former Hasty Mart, for example, and they had left all the fixtures in there, but they had to vacate the premises, then you would have to list those fixtures that are part of the retail commercial space that you could use as part of your business, your new business, and the landlord will consent to that, to you using the fixtures that are presently in the premises.
Okay, great. Franchise information, whether
That's only on the situation if it's we're dealing on a franchise. In this case, we're only dealing with the listing the existing space.
employee, seats,
No, nothing.
LBO,
Well, seats, you're into a restaurant, but we're not discussing that.
insurance expenses, management expenses,
If that's all to be
maintenance,
supplied by the landlord.
okay, heat expenses,
Everything,
hydro
yes.
expenses,
Yeah,
water expenses.
correct.
Am I even pointing in the right spot? Yeah.
You're doing great.
Other expenses, gross income, sales.
Now, that's for sale of a business. This is just renting vacant space.
Vacancy allowance,
Don't worry about it.
operating expenses,
Nope,
net income
No.
before debt,
nope,
estimated investment value at cost,
nope,
common area upcharge,
nope,
percentage rent,
nope.
expenses, actual or estimated, year expenses.
Yeah, well, that's when we talked about not the business expenses. If there was an existing business in there, you're not minding business. We're only talking about the operating expenses for the existing vacant retail commercial space.
Okay. And then down at the bottom, the brokerage information,
Yeah.
which would be, in this case, our office.
Correct.
And broker salesperson 1, broker salesperson 2, SPIS.
Yep.
And then, distribute to the internet and yada, yada, yada. Is there anything else, Terry, that you can think of?
Well, will give some of the agents in the office some of the basics, okay, of what one has to go through to properly list retail commercial space. There's all kinds of different spaces all over the city of Toronto and elsewhere. So you really have to do a thorough inspection, meet with the landlord, get all the proper documentation, put a nice email package together along with your listing information. And that way it's so much easier for a potential tenant from a third-party agent to go and look at the property, and you have all the information. Get it done right and correctly, and you'll lease the property with no problems.
Now, before I let you go, regarding the list price, in this case, I'm looking again at the 290, the West Mall.
Yes,
You would do what we do normally in residential, which is doing comparables to come up with the price per square footage.
that's possible, but the listing there says, I don't have it in front of me, but you got it there, they're asking X dollars per square foot per annum.
Yeah. So if you are a starting agent and you're doing your research, how would you come up with that? You would do
We'll do a comparative analysis, just
Just
like you would compare a
in
single-family
residential.
home to another single-family home within the same geographical or neighborhood area to get a value for that single-family home that you're going to potentially, hopefully, list for sale. Same thing, you can pull up, go on to Treb Commercial, you can go into sales or rentals, and go back the last 10 years and check what has been leased in that area, and you can take the comparables to come up with a number that fits your client per square foot. However, the landlord, your client, may say, no, I was getting $14 a square foot, I had a 5-year lease, but the market in the area now is $20 a square foot, so I want $20 a square foot. That's a decision by the landlord. You will then have to verify and check, is the market where this retail commercial space is worth $20 a square foot?
Now, you said we can go and use the archives. How would you say that rentals increase or decrease in general? Is there?
Well, I would suggest they've gone up considerably before COVID.
They went up considerably before COVID.
And I would say over the last 3 years, they've leveled, and in some cases they've dropped.
Okay. So
I can't give you the numbers, but we could go on Treb and look at what has leased in the same area as the property that you have there on the East Mall, and you can get a pretty good comparative analysis of what happened 3 or 4 years ago to present day.
And if there wasn't anything comparable, is there anything like, for example, for residential, we have the home price index where we can see the trends.
Yeah.
Is there anything like that for commercial?
Yes, there is, but it's difficult to find it. I'll give you an example. A CBRE, who are one of the top commercial real estate firms across Canada, and also LePage Commercial, they have 500 and some odd agents across Canada. They put out documentation, usually monthly, as to retail commercial space, leasing, industrial space, sale of buildings. You can find that by going into their website, etc. There are also some municipalities, if you go to City Mississauga, if I could use them as an example, they have a business development office, and they put out all the stats for retail, industrial, commercial space, both sale and rental. It's on there. You just got to go to the City Mississauga website, find that office, and a lot of it's on there.
And what was the name again? You said
it's business development.
Business development.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, great information. Now, the Royal LePage has some Royal LePage commercials, some subscriptions, right?
You can join Royal LePage Commercial. It's $100 a month. It is an excellent way for you to learn the Royal LePage Commercial real estate marketplace. And they have agents, I think there's 500 plus agents right across Canada.
Yep.
The bulk of them in the Greater Toronto area. And some of these Royal LePage commercial agents make $500,000 to $1 million a year.
On those Altus databases, can you subscribe and get information about retail? I think there's one for retail, is it not?
I'm not sure. Okay, with my eyesight, etc., I'm not very good at accessing that, so I have to have other people help me out with that.
No worries. But I think there's one for offices, there's one for industrial, and one for retail.
There could be. I'd be happy to go on the computer with you and go through it with you at your convenience.
Just another tool, but I mean, generally, if it's commercial, retail, like you said, most of it is on the MLS, so it should be
under the commercial.
On the commercial, yeah. So that will be a.
Sometimes the odd residential agent does list retail, commercial, or industrial space on the residential website. I've seen it a few times because they're afraid to go onto the Treb commercial site. It's a little more complicated.
Okay. All right.
However, once you try and you get on there, you'll know it forever.
It's just a matter of
great benefit
of playing with Stratus or Matrix and just try to change your parameters to get better results. Because, like I mentioned in the past, if you get too specific, then you don't get the right results. I think it's broader when, it's better when you're a little bit broad.
Well, it's good. You know what? the more knowledge the agent can get out in the retail commercial marketplace, say for Etobicoke, the better they can talk to their potential client about listing the retail commercial space for lease.
Okay, excellent.
So you got to do your homework. There's a lot of work involved. It's not a simple thing. Hey, I've had 55 years experience in this business. I learn something new every day.
All right.
Now, whether I can remember it at 77 years old, I don't know, but I try my best.
Well, thank you so much, Terry, and again, thanks to everybody for watching this little training video. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Julio. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you, Terry. Ladies and gentlemen, the legend, Mr. Terry Buck. See you.